biological father did not
I know, and
do what he was supposed to as far as a dad is concerned.
yeah, but I've not been doing that.
The gavel had not yet fallen. But the air inside the courtroom felt like it was already cracking under the weight of something sacred breaking. There was a stillness in the room that wasn't silence. It was suffocation. The kind that sits heavy on the lungs, reminding everyone present that before truth can set anyone free, it first destroys what was pretending to be whole. Outside, the courthouse steps were lined with flashing cameras and restless journalists, their lenses aimed like rifles, waiting for the first shot of collapse. The Brown family had arrived not as a single unit of unity they had once sold to America, but as fractured fragments of what used to be love, faith, and spectacle. The world had watched them build an empire of affection and faithfulness on television screens for years, watched them laugh, pray, and promise the impossible for hearts bound to one man. But now those same lenses captured the aftermath, for faces walking toward judgment, each carrying the ruins of belief that love could survive deception. Christine walked first, shoulders back, chin set, her resolve pressed against the gravity of years of endurance. Her heels echoed in a rhythm that reminded everyone she wasn't walking toward vengeance, but toward freedom. Her hair was pinned neatly, her eyes steady, but beneath that calm was a storm too long restrained. The kind of storm that brews not from hatred, but from exhaustion, decades of swallowing injustice, of watching smiles hide control, of raising children inside a faith built to protect everyone but her. Behind her came Janelle, strong in body but worn in soul, her expression a sculpture of restraint and rage. She carried files clutched to her chest like they were armor, every sheet of paper an echo of a promise broken. Her eyes darted to Christine with silent affirmation. They were no longer sister wives bound by one man's vision. They were soldiers bound by truth. Meri followed last, quiet and haunting, her face unreadable, but her steps heavy with the weight of having been both the first and the most forgotten. Once, she was the cornerstone of Kody's story, the foundation he had built his dream upon. Now she was a ghost of that same dream, walking toward its burial. Across the aisle, Kody Brown sat stiffly at the defense table, his face drained of the charisma that had once enchanted millions. His hair, once his symbol of youth and confidence, looked tamed and tired. The camera flashes that once celebrated him as the center of a loving empire now pierced his every movement with accusation. He adjusted his tie, a futile gesture to reclaim control, but the twitch in his jaw betrayed his unease. Robin sat beside him, his last remaining ally, his chosen favorite, his downfall wrapped in devotion. Her hand was gripping his arm, possessive and trembling, as though she believed that if she held tight enough, she could still keep his kingdom from collapsing around them. But her eyes betrayed her the gleam of guilt, the awareness that her loyalty had not saved him, only exposed him. When the judge entered, every murmur, every breath, every flash from outside ceased. The court rose, the benches creaked, and for a moment the silence was so pure it almost felt rehearsed. When everyone sat again, the sound of Bosie's meeting wood was like thunder rolling over the valley of broken vows. Kody's eyes lifted, scanning the room, reporters, spectators, ex-wives, all staring at him as though he were an artifact of a past they couldn't quite forgive. The judge's gavel struck a sharp crack that sliced through the air and declared the start of something irreversible. Court is now in session. Christine's attorney rose first, tall, composed, the tone of his voice heavy with conviction. "Your Honor," he began, "this is not a case about divorce or the disintegration of a television family. This is a case about deception along deliberate, calculated deception. What we will present before you today are not stories of jealousy or emotional wounds, but proof of manipulation, financial misconduct, and betrayal that destroyed not just a family, but the very foundation it claimed to represent." The words hung in the air like smoke. Kody shifted in his seat, his fists tightening on the table, knuckles whitening as though he could choke the words themselves into silence. Robin's grip on his arm tightened, her nails digging into the fabric of his suit sleeve. Across from them, Christine's face didn't move. Her stillness was almost eerie, like she had been preparing for this day for years. The lawyer continued, his voice steady, every syllable cutting through the tension with surgical precision. For years, Mr. Brown portrayed himself as a husband of fairness, a man of faith, an example to the world of balance among women. But beneath that image was a network of deceit, money redirected, promises broken, lives diminished. This case, Your Honor, is about accountability. Christine stared at her folded hands. Her nails dug into her palms, grounding her as the echoes of her attorney's words filled the courtroom. Every sentence was another breath she had held for years, finally released through someone else's voice. Janelle reached over, her hand warm on Christine's arm. A silent reassurance that they weren't alone in this fight anymore. Kody's lawyer whispered something in his ear, urging him to stay composed. But Kody's eyes were fixed on Christine, burning with a mixture of betrayal and disbelief. In his mind, she was the one who had started all of this. She had pulled the thread that unraveled everything. The television shows, the homes, the image, all of it had begun to decay when Christine had dared to say she was done. Robin's expression hardened. She could feel the judgment in the room, every camera, every whisper, every eye branding her as the villain. She was used to it now, but this felt different. This wasn't social media noise or fan speculation. This was truth under oath. And for once, she couldn't edit, explain, or smile her way out of it. Then came the first Blatha evidence. Christine's lawyer displayed the first set of documents, the cold mathematics of betrayal. Bank accounts drained, shared funds redirected, credit cards maxed out, assets shifted quietly under one roof. What we have here, he said, voice calm but merciless, is a clear and deliberate pattern. Money meant to support for families was redirected into one. While 3 households struggled to stay afloat, one thrived beyond reason. The room stirred. Reporters scribbled faster. Kody's jaw flexed. Christine felt her throat close, her teeth pressing into her lower lip to hold back the tremor that threatened to expose her. She had known the numbers. She had seen the statements. But hearing them out loud, hearing them confirmed in this sterile courtroom, under oath, was a kind of pain she couldn't prepare for. It wasn't just money. It was betrayal measured in dollars and decimals. When Janelle took the stand, her voice trembled at first, but each word gained weight as it came. "We trusted him," she said quietly. "We believed every decision he made was for all of us. We were told we were a team, a family. But every decision, every major choice turned out to benefit only one side." She paused, then added, voice sharpening, "I built a home with my own hands. I sacrificed my career, my comfort, my stability because I believed in him. And then one day I found out everything I'd built wasn't even mine. It had been sold, transferred, hidden. For what? For one household to flourish while the rest of us drowned." Kody slammed his fist on the table. "That's a lie." He barked, his voice exploding through the courtroom like shattering glass. "I gave everything to this family. Everything." The judge's gavel came down hard. "Mr. Brown, you will compose yourself, or I will have you removed." The murmurs rose in waves. Cameras clicked. The once charismatic patriarch of America's most famous plural family now looked like a cornered man unraveling under truth. Meri sat silent, eyes down, but her stillness spoke volumes. She had been the first wife who had stood beside him when the cameras weren't rolling, when dreams were still promises and not paychecks. And now she was the one who had lost everything without even realizing when the losing had begun. When asked to speak, her voice barely rose above a whisper. "I stayed," she said, "because I believed hope was enough. I believed that someday he'd see me again, not as part of a group, not as a title, but as a woman. But hope doesn't heal betrayal. Hope doesn't rebuild what's already been decided in someone else's heart." The silence after her words was deeper than any shout could have been. Even the judge looked up from his notes. For a fleeting moment, something softened in his eyes. Kody's shoulders slumped. Robin's grip faltered. For the first time, the couple who had built their image on unity seemed split by silence. Christine's eyes met Kody's, and in that single glance, years of pain, denial, and anger passed between them like electricity. There was no revenge left in her expression, only resolve. The kind of quiet strength that rises not from victory, but from survival. The judge called for a recess. The gavel struck once more, and the illusion shattered completely. The Brown family, once paraded across television screens as the embodiment of harmony and shared faith, now sat separated by tables, by lawyers, by walls of truth that no amount of camera polish could hide. Outside, the headlines were already writing themselves. But inside, beneath the heavy fluorescent lights, there was only one reality left. This wasn't about love anymore. It wasn't even about faith. It was about survival. And survival in that courtroom meant finally killing the myth that had kept them all bound for so long. As Christine rose from her seat, gathering her papers, Janelle and Meri followed. Gathering her papers, Janelle and Meri followed. The second day didn't begin with words, it began with stares. Cold, unrelenting, unblinking stares that said everything no one dared to voice aloud. The courthouse steps were chaos. Storm of reporters pressing microphones into every silence, flashing lights into every moment of hesitation. But inside the courtroom, the world moved slower. The ticking of the clock dragged like a heartbeat trying to survive its own exhaustion. The Brown family had arrived again, but nothing about them looked the same. The fractures that had been invisible just 24 hours ago were now clear as glass. The air was thick with something heavier than fear. It was exposure. The kind that doesn't just reveal lies, but redefines everyone who told them. Christine entered first again, but this time her calm wasn't silence. It was control. She no longer carried the heaviness of someone hoping to be believed. She carried the power of someone who knew she would be. Janelle followed, expression set in granite, a quiet determination etched across her face. And Meri, she looked different, lighter somehow, like a woman who had finally stopped holding her breath after years of suffocating under loyalty. They didn't look like wives walking into court. They looked like survivors walking into closure. Across the aisle, Kody's chair sat empty for a long minute before he entered. His posture tense, his suit sharper, darker, as if the color could hide what his eyes couldn't. He walked with that old swagger, the one that had once convinced millions that he was in control. But the cameras caught the tremor in his hand when he adjusted his cufflink, the slight twitch beneath his confident smirk. Robin trailed behind, her eyes red-rimmed, face pale beneath the weight of sleeplessness and dread. She had always been the calm, soft-spoken center of Kody's world. But today, even her silence looked frightened. When the judge entered, the courtroom seemed to breathe again, but only barely. "We will continue," he said, his voice firm. "The witness testimony will proceed." That was when the door at the back opened and everything changed. The bailiff announced the name and the courtroom stirred like a ripple cutting across still water. Cameras leaned forward. Heads turned. Even Kody froze. The witness was someone no one expected, a former business associate. A quiet man with a reputation for discretion. Someone who had worked with Kody for years behind the scenes on contracts, accounts, and media negotiations. The kind of man who saw everything but said nothing. Until today. He took the stand, hand trembling slightly as he swore the oath. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "I do," he said, voice low. Christine didn't move. She just stared, eyes narrowed as though she already knew what was coming. The attorney approached. "Please state your name for the record." He did, "And your relationship to Mr. Brown." "I handled certain financial distributions related to his family's television contracts and appearance deals." A murmur spread through the courtroom like static electricity. Kody's head jerked up, eyes flashing to his lawyer. Robin's face drained of color. The attorney's tone sharpened. "Mister, can you please explain what you mean by certain financial distributions?" The man hesitated. Funds that were meant to be divided evenly between the households were sometimes redirected. Redirected, the attorney repeated. "By whom?" The man swallowed hard. "By Mr. Brown." The room exploded into whispers, camera flashes stuttering like lightning. Kody slammed his palm against the table again, the sound echoing off marble and glass. "That's not true. You're twisting everything, Mr. Brown," the judge warned, gavel striking. "Sit down." But the damage was done. The witness continued, voice steadier now that the truth had been spoken once. There were separate accounts opened under LLCs. Money from production, sponsorships, and network bonuses, money that was supposed to be divided for ways, was funneled to one account. Mrs. Robin Brown's name was on that account. No one else's. Robin gasped softly, hand flying to her mouth. Kody turned on her instantly, whispering something harsh, his eyes full of panic and fury. She shook her head, tears forming as if she too were hearing the details for the first time. But her trembling gave her away. She wasn't hearing it for the first time. She was hearing it being proven. Christine looked down at her hands again, but this time she smiled. Not a smile of victory, but of release. Years of suspicion, of whispered doubts, of being told she was paranoid were now confirmed in a single sentence under oath. Janelle's face didn't move, but the tightening of her jaw said everything. They had built their fortune on lies, and finally, though, the truth was costing them everything. The lawyer presented documents one after another, signatures, bank statements, wire transfers. The paper trail was undeniable. Kody's name appeared again and again, a pattern that could no longer be spun as coincidence. When Kody's lawyer stood to cross-examine, his questions were sharp, designed to reclaim control. "You're suggesting, sir, that my client deliberately hid funds. Do you have any direct proof he intended to deceive his family?" The witness didn't hesitate. "He told me to make sure they never found out." The courtroom went dead silent. Even the judge paused. Christine's attorney turned slowly toward Kody, expression unreadable. "Would you like me to repeat that, Mr. Brown?" Kody didn't answer. He stared straight ahead, jaw locked, face pale. Robin's hands were clasped tightly in her lap, but her knuckles had gone white. A single tear slipped down her cheek, and for the first time, she didn't wipe it away. Outside, the headlines would later call it the moment. The second the Brown Empire officially fell. The point at which the illusion of unity collapsed under the weight of greed. But inside the courtroom, no one spoke. Not for a long time. The judge cleared his throat. "We will take a brief recess," he said, though his tone carried the heaviness of realization. Kody rose slowly, his movements mechanical, as though his body no longer believed his mind's denial. He turned to Robin, whispering something too low for the microphones to catch, but her reaction said enough. She flinched, shaking her head, lips forming the words, "Stop blaming me." Christine, Janelle, and Meri stood together. Their unity no longer forced, no longer fragile. They didn't celebrate. They didn't need to. Truth was its own victory. When they stepped outside, the crowd roared. Questions, lights, chaos. But the three women moved through it like a tide, steady, unmoved, free. Behind them, through the glass doors, Kody and Robin remained inside, silhouettes framed against the harsh courtroom light. Two figures clinging to the wreckage of something they once called love. And somewhere in the quiet between camera clicks and shouted questions, Christine's voice broke through. Calm, steady, final. It wasn't about revenge. It was about ending the lie. It was about ending the lie. The third day began like the calm before a storm that everyone already knew was coming. The sky outside the courthouse hung gray, swollen with the promise of rain. As though even the weather understood that something was about to break. The crowd gathered early, reporters clutching umbrellas, murmurs of anticipation threading through the air like static. But inside the courtroom, it was the silence that struck first. The kind that isn't peaceful. The kind that presses against the ribs and makes breathing feel like betrayal. Every chair creaked softer. Every movement was measured. It wasn't curiosity anymore that filled the room. It was judgment. The kind that has already decided where the truth lives. Kody Brown entered with a stiffness that wasn't confidence this time. It was collapse disguised as posture. His once firm shoulders were hunched beneath the weight of something heavier than guilt, exposure. The suit that had seemed so sharp the day before now looked like a costume he couldn't quite fit into anymore. Robin followed, her face pale, mascara faintly smudged beneath sleepless eyes. Her hand reached for Kody's arm out of reflex, but he didn't take it. He didn't even look at her. The cameras caught everything, that tiny moment of disconnect that said more than any statement ever could. On the other side, Christine sat still, poised, her expression unreadable. The first day she had walked into this courtroom trembling. The second day, she had held her ground. But today, there was something different in her stillness. It was peace. The kind of peace that only comes after you've already lost everything and finally accepted that maybe that loss was freedom in disguise. Janelle sat beside her, calm, steady, protective as ever. And Meri, quiet, observing, distant, but not broken, carried an aura that almost glowed. They weren't here to fight anymore. The fight was already won. Today was about truth, putting its final period at the end of a long, painful sentence. The judge entered promptly at 9. His face gave nothing away, but the faint sigh he exhaled as he took his seat told everyone this was no ordinary case. "We are reconvened," he said, voice echoing through the high ceilings. "Closing arguments will begin." Christine's attorney stood, buttoned his coat, and approached the jury with the calm assurance of a man who didn't need to raise his voice to be heard. "This case," he began, "has never been about punishment. It's about acknowledgement. It's about seeing what was hidden in plain sight for years, the cost of control, the silence of loyalty, and the courage it takes to finally break both." He turned toward the judge. "The evidence speaks clearly. The deception was intentional. The manipulation was real. The harm undeniable." Kody's lawyer rose, quick to counter, his tone clipped but desperate. "Your Honor, we've heard emotional testimony, yes. We've seen transactions, yes. But what we have not seen is intent to harm. Mr. Brown provided for his family for decades. The networks, the money, they were all tied to one man's name. This wasn't theft. It was logistics, miscommunication, misunderstanding." He paused, looking toward Kody as if to anchor him. "My client never meant to destroy his family. He meant to lead them." But the words fell flat. Even Kody didn't seem to believe them anymore. When Christine's lawyer stood again for rebuttal, his voice was lower, softer, but somehow more powerful for it. "Leadership without honesty," he said, "is just control with better lighting." The courtroom went silent. Even the cameras stopped clicking. Kody's eyes lifted, glassy, defiant, yet defeated. His lips pressed into a thin line, as though he wanted to speak but couldn't find the version of himself who still believed he had the right to. Robin looked at him then, really looked at him, and something in her broke. The illusion, the defense, the years of pretending that love could survive control. When the judge finally began to speak, his words were slow, deliberate. "The evidence presented before this court confirms that funds were mishandled and trust was violated. This was not a misunderstanding. It was a breach, personal and financial. While this court does not weigh matters of the heart, it does recognize patterns of manipulation that go beyond mismanagement." He paused, eyes flicking toward Kody. "Mr. Brown, you built a family in public view, but what was shown to the world was not what existed behind closed doors." Christine exhaled a long, quiet release that seemed to empty years of held breath. Janelle closed her eyes, her lips curving into the faintest smile. Meri stared straight ahead, still and steady, her fingers brushing the edge of the table like a woman touching the ghost of her own past one last time. The judge's gavel fell once. "This court finds in favor of the plaintiffs." The sound was final. It wasn't loud, but it felt endless. Kody's head dropped. Robin covered her mouth, stifling a sob that escaped anyway. The courtroom stirred, cameras flashing like small explosions of truth. Christine didn't move. She didn't smile or cry. She simply stood, gathered her files, and looked toward Kody one last time. Their eyes met, and in that silence was everything they'd never been able to say. The love that once existed. The years that couldn't be undone. The lies that had buried both. She turned away first. Outside, rain had begun to fall. Soft but relentless, like the sky itself was finally washing the story clean. The reporters swarmed, shouting questions, chasing sound bites. But Christine didn't stop. Janelle and Meri followed close behind, walking through the storm like women who had just stepped out of a cage and realized the air still belonged to them. Behind them, through the